Greetings, Imaginarians. Dr. G here. So we got Mysteries of the Psyche. Today we're talking about the human conserved transcriptional response to adversity. What this is a finding in psychoneuroimmunology that deals with a particularly well-described set of transcriptional responses that you find in immune cells. Okay, so you may be asking, what in the world is Dr. G on about today? Well, as it turns out, this response is sensitive to psychosocial variables. So that's where I'm going with this. What is it? So the conserved transcriptional response to adversity is a set of changes in the gene profile of human immune cells. For any of you immunology nerds out there, we're talking about the mononucleocytes. So, as it turns out, psychosocial conditions like trauma, loneliness, or bereavement, i.e., situations in which you are separated from the social group of some kind, something I'm always talking about on this channel, this actually seems to trigger a specific biological response in the immune system. And what happens is when the CTRA gets activated, you get an upregulation of pro-inflammatory genes, such as interleukin, tumor necrosis factor, IL-8, and a downregulation at the same time of antiviral genes, such as interferon and antibody responses, okay, genes that are responsible for those things. Okay, so let me say that again. In response to adversity, this set of transcriptional changes seems to occur in these immune cells that actually upregulate inflammation and they downregulate virus defense in the immune system. So this is, and the reason why this is called the conserved transcriptional response to adversity is because it's found not just in humans, but it's found in many species. Now, you may ask yourself, or you may not, why does this happen? So whenever I see something like this, I'm asking, what is the evolutionary impetus behind this? Like, what's the function of this? Especially if it's conserved. That means it serves some kind of function. Very likely, anyway. And as you kind of dig into this literature and the study that I'm referring to today, I'll put in the link in the description below. What the theory is at this point is that inflammation responses seem to be more protective for wound injuries and bacterial infections, whereas the antiviral side of things, the cell-mediated immune response, is obviously better against viral infections. So you might ask yourself, well, why would trauma or loneliness make you more well defended against inflammation? Or, well, why would loneliness and trauma make you more susceptible to inflammation? Well, the reason that is that these inflammatory responses actually protect us from wounds and bacterial infection. So why does this happen, you might ask? Well, as it turns out, the pro-inflammatory response of the CTRA is actually protective against wounds and bacterial infection. So what appears to be going on here is that when you get psychosocial indicators that you are more on your own, the very immune system actually responds to this with an innate response that says, okay, we're not going to worry about viruses as much. We're going to worry about wounds and bacteria. Now think about this in the ancestral environment. If I normally am living in a tribe, or if you go much further back in some kind of organized group of proto-humans, hominins, whatever, if I'm separated from the tribe, the viral threat to me is probably going to be less, because most of our viruses, honestly, we get from other humans. However, we're going to be more on our own, in which case wounds, predators, the environmental dangers are going to be increased. So apparently evolution has it hardwired into the genome that on the particular identification of these social changes, our body shifts and says, okay, well, I've got to work on this. Now, here's the problem. The problem is that, especially when it comes to loneliness, there's so much of it that there are a lot of people that are chronically in this state. And these chronic inflammation states lead to all kinds of chronic health problems. Curiously enough, these are probably chronic health problems that didn't really bother too many people in the ancestral environment because people didn't live long enough for it to make much difference on the whole. And that is something you see in evolution all the time, is I'm going to trade off health, long-term health, for getting through tomorrow. Now, here's what the investigators did in this particular study, which I think is very fascinating. It's Fredrickson and et al. So what they did is they took 122 adults and they gave them the mental health continuum short form survey. The mental health continuum short form survey right here is a 14 question survey placed on a Likert scale that asks questions like, are you happy? Are you interested in life? Are you satisfied with life? And 3 of these are labeled the hedonic scale. And these are questions that center around the idea of how good do you feel? How satisfied are you? But then there's another set of questions on the scale that they labeled eudaimonic, which just means pro-social. It goes back to Aristotle. Anyway, these are questions like, do you feel a sense of meaning in your life? Do you feel like people are basically good? Do you feel like you belong in a community? Do you feel like you have something to contribute to society? And the reason I'm belaboring this is that only some of these questions correlated with the CTRA response. And that's what was so fascinating about this study. As it turns out, that eudaimonic well-being, as measured by this scale, had an inverse relationship with the CTRA response. So in other words, the more satisfied you were with your social and meaning-oriented status in the world, the more you saw an actually measured difference in the CTRA response. Hedonic well-being, however, did not correlate with it. Isn't that interesting? So those, in other words, put it yet another way, people who express a sense of meaningfulness and social goals, but not just simple pleasure and satisfaction, were the ones that showed the correlation between their sense of well-being and the inflammatory response. So, what's the take-home message here? Well, I was curious when I read this study, did they have any, this was a cross-sectional study, did they have any longitudinal studies is what I wanted to know. Because the curiosity I was experiencing was, is this causal? What causes what here? It's correlative study, so we can't tell. So I actually got in touch with Steve Cole, who was one of the main coordinators of this research. He's a psychoneuroimmunologist out of California, and he was good enough to respond and answer my questions. And he said that there are quite a few studies actually that are longitudinal in nature that look at things like meditation, yoga, even different changes in language as correlated with the CTRA response. There's a lot of really interesting literature on this subject. So I think that the take-home lesson here is that the brain and the immune system are tightly interwoven. Okay, this is no shock because we know here and we speak here of how the mind and the body are one. And as it turns out, there are innate responses to our social standing. And when we sense and detect in our environment that our social standing is under threat, we have reactions that go all the way down to our immune system responses, at the molecular and genetic level. You can see this response happening. And it appears, and we'll get into more of these studies as we go on Mysteries of the Psyche, it appears as though working on one's prosocial and meaning-oriented happiness or satisfaction or well-being is what actually reverses this response and gets us out of that chronic inflammation state that may have served us out in the jungles or the plains or whatever of Africa. But in the modern setting, it winds up causing a lot of chronic problems that are just numerous. So, shockingly, working on things like eudaimonia and prosociality and belonging, which is stuff I've been yammering on about here on this channel for a long time, do seem to be the things that trigger this specific innate immune psychoneuroimmunology related response. Go figure. So don't forget to like and subscribe if you like this kind of stuff. Go check out ericgoodwyn.com. You can see what I've got going on lately, things that are in the pipeline. You can check out the cover and the book trailer for my new book that's coming out, A Jungian Analysis of Toxic Modern Society. And then later on this year, there's going to be a cover reveal for my new fantasy novel that's going to be coming out as well, which is called King of the Forgotten Darkness. All right, so that's what I got for you today. See you next time on the Mysteries of the Psyche.